Leadership as a path to inner freedom. A yogic or corporate seminar. Part 1. What is trying to happen here? A look at evolution and the human condition.
Somebody in a movie asked a really good question one time. He said, "Are you waiting to talk or are you listening?" And the fella said, "I'm waiting to talk, but I'm trying." And that's really important, that you not cause static in reacting to everything. You're reacting, waiting to get your word in edgewise, when really circumstances are neutral. If you're going to object to something or have to reason something out, there is a third option sometimes, most of the time, and that is to let it be and get out of the box, go beyond that. The time it takes you to react and say, "Oh, I wish that wasn't happening," or "I don't like that," or even "I do like that," the time it takes you to think about all of that strips you of some of the energy you could be using to forge ahead. When you're reacting, it's like static, and your perception to the radio station is impaired by this static. But if you don't react and say, "Yes, I can, I can, I want to. What's trying to happen here? There's a way. What is it?" And you ask the right question, then you are a cause and not an effect. You are, in fact, creating instead of just reacting to what is around you. It seems to me that the best leaders in history and the best artists and the best Einsteins and scientists, no matter who they were, if they did something that hinged on genius or that was enlightening, it seems to me that they were always people that were unattached to the results. There are businessmen that said, "Oh, why not? Let's try it. Just for the love of trying it." And if they lost all their money, well, then there's a lesson to learn. People that had that kind of a resiliency did really well in life. An artist that wasn't afraid to put a broad stroke and then try something new. And it was like writing on water. He set it aside, it was beautiful, and then he wasn't defined by it. He went on to do other things and reinvent himself in other ways. This is a good potential for leadership, these kind of qualities in people. They're not attached to what they have done, and they're always striving to do something more, maybe in another direction. And when you're working on yourself like that, optimistically, and bettering yourself, you can change your habits. It might take a long time. Habits are ingrained over a long period of time. But let's say if you're working on greed or being angry or impatient, and you're having a hard time dwelling on that. Well, somebody wise once said that you can't beat the darkness with a stick, you have to turn on the light. So if you can't confront some of these bad habits, if you're impatient, then try to work on the opposite quality. Try and be generous and giving and understanding. See, you had that energy that was in a whirlpool, a vortex, holding that impatience and greed and grouchiness in there, in this vortex. And that's contractive. That's folding in upon itself, this quality, and becoming tighter and tighter. But a good quality that reaches out to others in service, like generosity, is expansive, and it's tapping into that river that is getting wider and wider and flowing to freedom. Of course, a river goes to a sea, and that's nature. Nature is intelligent. In the animals, evolution is pretty much automatic until they can get the frontal lobe and the function that lets us think for ourselves and think what will make me happy and what's more fulfilling. But up to that point, evolution is pretty intelligent on its own. And it's pretty intelligent even after we get our reasoning faculties. Because that energy is always there. The energy that was bound up in our bad habits of being impatient and all of that. That energy is always there. You can't kill energy. And you can't create it. It gets transformed into this beautiful giving and patience. And so with the idea that you've taken an energy and transformed it, you've taken something destructive and transformed it into something productive, this is how you better yourself. This is how your qualities get more refined and you get more intuitive. Well, my favorite president, President Lincoln, said something that I've just discovered that was really along these lines of thought. He was such a deep thinker, and everything he said was so concise. He would say in a few words something that you'd been thinking about maybe for years. But somebody asked him, "Sir, why do you make friends of your enemies? Why don't you try to destroy your enemies?" And Lincoln gently replied, "Am I not destroying my enemies when I make them my friends?" And so there is no death. There's transformation. Here we are in the material world with all the sense gratification that we feel, bound to this little world in so many ways, wondering why we have to learn these lessons over and over again, getting hurt, and then we go and attach ourselves to the world again, to matter. When matter, scientists have already found that matter is different densities of vibration. Vibration is thought. Thoughts are ideas. An idea, the idea realm, is closer to creation itself. So here we are dwelling on the material things in life, which is pretty much closest to the lowest level. And there's an intelligence to life, just like I was talking about with evolution of animals. Well, there's an intelligence with our intuition as well. And this material plane serves to show us not to be attached to the senses, but to pass through into a more fluid existence, like a liquidy, fluid existence, and up into the fiery state of sureness, of determination, and up into the gases, into the ether, and into the air of pure ideas and pure possibilities. Well, this intelligence, just like in the evolution of animals, when we understand more and more subtly where to turn, where to go now in order to get into the higher, freer realms, away from so much a matter consciousness, there is that intelligence there. We react to situations, but they're neutral. They don't want to hurt us. They don't want to help us. It's our reaction to them that causes the attachment and causes the bad habits of depending on the material things in this world. But if we would learn from what this intelligence is trying to teach us, when you touch a hot stove, the stove isn't trying to hurt you, but the intelligence is saying, we're not meant to be scraping, have this friction against the material plane. The hand is not meant for heat. The hand is meant for creativity. And so we learn not to touch that hot stove, and we learn not to depend on the fleeting sense gratifications that are flying by all the time. We learn to instead strive and belong more to the inner fortitude that we feel. And we feel this way when we are generous and giving, because that's expansive. And we are using the outward world rightly by taking our theories and our ideas of right action and putting them into motion in the world, helping people. And this is not only expansive, but it's magnetic. We are creating a magnetism that, in fact, all our molecules are going in the same direction. And the closer we get to the North Pole, where everything is in line, the more we can be centered. And when you're centered, you're not only above the material state of the world, you're more into a state of lightness and freedom. And you get above the state where duality is, cause and effect is always in motion back and forth. You get above that state. The Newtonian law that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Well, if you're in a state of centeredness, you don't have to react. So you don't have to react badly or well. You don't give into the wave of euphoria, so there's no trough of depression. And being centered like that is, you're out of the gravitational pull. You're out of the karmic results of your actions because you're at rest in the center. You're not playing the game. You're not in the movie. You've stepped out of the movie and you're watching. And when you refine your own nature in these ways, you have victory over time itself in space, because there's no movement of the pendulum back and forth. No movement. No time from here to there. You're suspended, and instead of reacting, there you are. You can create a new action. You can create fresh, new actions. You are being a cause in this world and not an effect. You are saying, yes, I can. Oh, why not? And you're like the businessman who takes on a venture and he's not attached to the money he may lose. You're saying, oh, I only live once in this body. Let's try it. Why don't we? It'll help everyone. And in these ways, you get more and more subtly developed, and you get more refined in your nature. And you learn how to access that intelligence and tap into it more and more. You learn to ask it the right questions. If you ask the right question, and then you take all of that energy that would have been caught up in reacting to things you didn't like, and you've collected a little bit here and a little bit there, and you're serving people, and you're serving grander thoughts and more pure intuitions and more potential for good. you're serving. So you have that energy that was bound up in habits, and it's getting into a flow for you. The flow of goodness to the north end of the magnet. You're getting more magnetized. And with this goodness that's rising in you, there is potential to do good in the world. Nature knows what to do with the river, doesn't it? The tributaries collect and the flow becomes great. And like I said, it unravels those eddies that were those whirlpools of negativity. It unravels them and they all get in the big flow. And what does it do? It empties out into an ocean of the panoramic view of everybody and everything, where your little wave doesn't matter. In fact, from the distance, you don't even see your little wave or the trough. It all looks level. It is level and even-minded and cheerful. And when you start to think more intuitively in these ways and ask the right questions, then your own resources start to become available to you. Things that you've put into action in the past that are going to cause a reaction, because like Newton's law says, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And you've put some energies out there that are in the circle that have to come back to you to teach you your lesson. And gravity tells you the same thing, that there is this intelligence. What goes up must come down. And a circuit must complete itself. But when it completes itself, it can be transformed into something higher, a higher octave. And we want to be free in our mind. And as we grow and get older, we want to be unattached to harmful emotions and unattached to worldly things, so that surely we don't think that all the realms, all the heavenly realms, if you think of it that way, everything that exists is bound to a thing you can see, feel, and touch that is a material thing. Surely you must believe that there are realms where we may not need bodies. I mean, sure, you can't kill the energy and you can't create energy. Where does that energy go when we leave this body? What about if we've been non-attached in our lives? I mean, if you were smoking a cigarette after a cigarette and you die, you're going to be wanting that cigarette, and you will end up back in a realm like this. But if you were able to set yourself apart and become the watcher and say, well, that little body sure likes to drink alcohol and sure likes cigarettes and really fattening foods and likes to talk, likes cars, different things that are on the grosser level, then you will be coming back to fulfill what you want. Because if you get in a higher realm that's more centered and serene, you might be like a fish out of water. You haven't trained for that. You haven't sat in the silence and learned how to focus your mind and still your mind. And whenever your mind started to penetrate this way and that way and get excited, you didn't bring it back like a swing, trying to stop the swing so you could get off and be quiet. You didn't spend time in your life doing that. So where do you think you're going to go when your body expires? You're going to be kind of grabbing for something similar. But if you said, no, I don't want to be in a movie. I want to make my own movie. I want to create. I don't want to just react to things. I want to create. I want to act from an original standpoint. I want to make my own creation, one that brings me happiness. well, then you can expect, not only after you die, but even as you grow more mature and more intelligent in your nature, you can expect the realization of this kind of peace in your life. Of course there's higher realms. I mean, if we think that what happens in this little mud ball of Earth, if we think that that's what happens everywhere in galaxies upon galaxies, then we're awfully small-minded, aren't we? But if we look around us, even on this Earth, we'll see a whole of different ideas in ways of living. If a person was to go and study the life of maybe a hermit, someone who lived very simply, you might find a lot of different habits, and maybe a lot less habits. People who learn to not do everything they want, that way they'll do what they like. They'll do what their body says, oh, that's going to make me relieved and happier, and that's going to make me expansive. So when we get frustrated and we take a fault, like being prone to fits of anger, if we give in to that and cater to it and court that anger, evolution and the creative process will say, oh, this is what you're working on? Well, we will accommodate that. We will help you. And the anger will grow and say, oh, I can do even better than that. I can even be angrier than that. Do you want to see this? And, the same with envy, greed. And you get trapped into thinking, what's in it for me? You get a sense of relief from siding with yourself that you were justified in thinking these ways. But if you instead cling to the higher way, all of these little bad habits and bad attributes that you have, if you instead try to focus them like the many little threads that have to go together to go through a needle, and you focus on bringing them into the flow of good instead of the extremities of pointing this way and that way, the same as the molecules in your magnet. You want them all pointing the north-south direction, so there's power there, and going to the North Pole, not the South Pole, not the creative force that goes outward and gets more and more excitable, but the inner force that gets more and more subtle and settled and silent, so that you can have perspective and have intuition. And you're taking these angers and these bad qualities, and like I said, if you can't work on them, it's too painful, or you're not focused enough, you can at least suspend them a little bit by working on their opposites. Work on your generosity. Do something generous. Do something patient. Listen to somebody. You're suspending that impatience for a period of time and putting it on the shelf. Well, your habit will work in your favor then, because it'll kind of forget after a while that it's on the shelf. It's used to working on this generous project that you're doing now. And that's how you, bit by bit, start to better yourself and start to let this natural intelligence that not only brought us the evolution of rocks to plants to vertebrate to animals to birds, but also is with us every step of the way when we start reasoning and realizing that we're separate from the animals, and we're separate in that we're working on our own faults, even to the higher level than that, that intelligence will stay with us to let us see, yes, you are starting to see that you are all part of the panorama. We are all part of the panorama. We all make one consciousness. And that consciousness that we're getting closer to again is the consciousness that separated us into an existence in the first place. The potential of thought and idea that it joyfully emoted, but that got into these little eddies and whirlpools of thinking, what's in it for me? And starting to make us unhappy and go in all kinds of wrong directions. In our lower natures, and this is, a little more intelligent than the animals, who might think, I feel hunger, and they instinctually have to do something about it. Whereas, a human will think, I'm the one that's hungry. And then they start realizing they have to do something to quench that hunger. And if they can get with someone who's on a higher level of intelligence, they can be a serf or a worker, a manual worker. And if they're working around somebody like a king or a smart businessman or a kind housewife, they will see that these ways of actions make you happier and get you more of the things you need. And once you're out of the mentality of just working for a reason you're not sure of, then you come into more of a merchant mentality in your evolution, and you start to think craftily. Oh, I could do this and get some money, and I could have money to buy this and that. And you start thinking, what's in it for me? And you don't do things for the good of everyone. You do things for the good of you and for the good of your family. And that works for a while, but then you start getting tired of that because there's no flair there. There's no expansion out of there. So it starts to dawn on you that I want to help other people. Gosh, when I do that, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel better when I give somebody something and they love it than when I get something that I love. And you start to want to protect people, even people in your country. You get more of a warrior mentality and think, well, I would die for this cause. You get idealistic, and it's grand. But even that causes highs and lows, waves and troughs. You try to do something good, and something negative happens over here as a byproduct of what you did there. And you realize, I want to be free, totally free. I don't even want to be in this movie. I can help people more just by being absolutely untouched by it, because that's the only way people are going to get it. They're going to see someone untouched by all of it, and they're going to sense how they can do it too. So I can't just jump in the water and try and save everybody, because I'll drown too. But if I'm going a path where they can get up and out of the water and not be drowning and follow my example, if I can be free, that can free them. And if you're free in your heart, that translates. People can feel that. And they want what you've got. And so the next level is the level of the sages or the saints or the people that you've known in your life that are free and they're happy and they try to help, but they're not touched by it because they know they can only help if they're the producer of the movie and they can't go and be in the movie. Somebody has to be above the movie. Somebody has to be above the shadows and the light of that movie projector. Someone has to be forging the path that says, we're going to need to leave here too. We've got to get higher. Don't rest. We've got to better ourselves. we've got to be free. We've got to learn to behave so that we don't get into patterns of behavior and habits that will drag us down again. And if we can be free and non-attached when we do pass out of this body, then we won't be grabbing like a fish out of water for this world again. We'll be like a martial artist that realized that tuning his body to a fine focus was not quite as good as being able to tune his mind to that focus. So he stepped it up and he started to tune his mind to that focus. And he's able to concentrate, and he's able to be non-attached and feel free, and he's able to ask the right questions and open up to an answer without having to wade through all the what ifs. He knows how to concentrate and receive an answer. What is it? You know what you want. What is it? It's got to be there. And there's that intelligence that's natural in nature. And you do it enough times, you use your intuition enough times that your intuition starts kicking in and saying, I know what you want me to do. You want me to find an answer for this. So you've learned at the end of your life how to find these answers and how to focus. All of a sudden, your body's gone. So you know there's the brass ring. You know what to grab for. You know that anything that was down in the world, it's all moving at its own pace too. Energy is put into a leaf, and it'll be put into something else later. And when it gets higher and higher and more refined, it'll be a thought and an idea that can carry you into realms that don't need trees and food and gas and cars and those you love, if you were able to help them, will be in those realms too. And you will merge closer and closer to each other, and friends and people will be more in tune with the way you are, because they're the ones that grew into the area you've grown into. So obviously they were learning the same lessons you were learning, and everything gets sweeter and more harmonious because there's more and more love there. It's hard sometimes when you're working on yourself and you're an excitable person. You've let bad habits sort of take over your life, and you've got to find your way back out of that labyrinth to the simplicity of being able to not think about that if you don't feel like thinking about it. These invading thoughts, you don't want them, and you want the simplicity of just being able to relax. Well, I always found it hard to idle. I found I had to be going in this direction or that direction, and found it hard to be still. Because when I got still, I would become lethargic and lazy, and then I'd be stagnant. And ideas and projects, everything in this world have to be fluid, they have to be flowing. And this is another thing to think about in leadership as well, is that you want to get a project off the ground, even if you're not sure what direction it should go in. You've done the talking, you've done some planning. Now, you don't want to waste energy because you've already thought about these things to a point where you're ready to move on it. And if you don't move on it, then the ideas have no way to be tested. They're untried. And it's better even to start in a direction, even though you're not sure if it's the right direction, than to sit and keep deliberating You want to start moving, because think of a boat in the water. It's hard to make that boat turn left if you want to go left, or turn right if it's sitting still. What are you going to do? You're going to need a lot of manpower. But if you got it going and it's flowing along, then it's really easy to tip it this way or tip it that way. So get your project started, and then you might open yourself to the intuitions. Should I turn right here? Should I turn left here? Should I go straight a little longer? And take each person as they are. Feel what would be a good way for them to develop. And still your project would come to fruition. And find a way that'll work for the moment. Go that way. And then when a better opportunity comes up, or a different direction, you're centered, you're listening, you're not reacting, you're creating your own actions as you go. You're a cause, not an effect. And you're able to go left or right. You're able to tie up the loose ends. You're able to have a project that you can be proud of. And to have momentum doesn't mean that the boat needs to be physically going, that your project needs to be physically moving along. But in inspiration and in various momentums, I heard of a couple fellows that were sawing a log, and one of them was sawing away all day long, and the other one was taking pauses and sitting down. And at the end of the day, the one that had been taking pauses had sawed way more wood than the other one who just worked incessantly. And he asked him, "How were you able to work so much better than me? You kept taking all those breaks." And he said, "Yes, but while I was taking breaks, I was sharpening my saw." So there are refined ways of keeping things going, and you want to tap into the best way to keep projects lively, inspired, motivated. Everybody has a limb that they're assigned to. Check on your limbs, make sure they're all working well, and if any of them need lubrication, find out what they need. If they need any resources, give them your enthusiasm. And if you're not worried about the outcome of this action or that action, but that you're trying your best because you've got a focus and an end in sight, and you're trying to strive towards that, and you're not attached to blame or praise, then you've got your energy freed up to be able to serve all those limbs. Say, "What can I do for you? How are you doing? Oh, come on, we'll do this thing." And I hope for the best in all your projects. And I know I've certainly learned a lot from studying leadership. Maybe I've generated some energy to take on a few projects in my life. I hope so. Thank you for listening.
To allow the imagination leeway like this is the only way that the mind can develop the freedom to be able to find new possibilities that are really true. A scientist who is able, that's what they do with brainstorming sessions. They say, don't be critical, just talk. Come up with ideas, suggestions. And it doesn't matter if they're no good, don't exercise your critical faculty, because that paralyzes creativity. The time for criticism comes later. So now just think, come up with ideas. The more harebrained, in a sense, the better, because that sort of frees you from the shackles of conventional wisdom, and in that way you may come up with some far out but absolutely valid discovery. Later on you can sift through it critically and say, well, that obviously wouldn't work, but sometimes there's a real pearl there. Well, that is the way the creative faculty works. And so to entertain the possibility of the absurd is a necessary step on the path toward finding truth. A very interesting experience, which I've shared with many of you, was 2 or 3 months ago when my father died. And my mother phoned me, and I was lying in bed, and after I heard that he'd died, I sort of mentally tuned into him, and I could feel his consciousness. It was a very interesting experience, because we hadn't been that close. He was very dogmatic in his scientific approach. He had no interest in talking about the whys of things, the deeper meaning of things, the philosophy of things. He just, anytime I would say anything like that, he'd sort of put it down. I had a lot of respect for him. He was a fine person. But we didn't share interests. We had none of those things in common. One time, I asked him if he had read a book of mine. And he said, no. And then he went on, have you read an article I gave you that I wrote? No. He said, well, you see. That's how it was. It's too bad, but it's how it was. When he died, I felt a consciousness that was very separate from all the things that he'd done, the self-definitions that he'd acquired, the beliefs that he was very firm in his beliefs. I know how absolutely convinced he was that we'd never land anybody on the moon. It was scientifically impossible. Of course, he had to adjust to the reality when it happened, but he was dogmatic in his way. And yet this energy that I felt behind that dogmatism, which is what I felt that morning, was of a very fresh, strong energy, which he had put forth in overcoming the obstacles that he had to face in his life. Very honest, very honorable, very vigorous and courageous. He was all of those things. And that was what he had gained in his lifetime. And those other self-definitions were stripped off. They weren't the real he. Nor are you what you seem to be to your friends, in the sense of your self-definitions, your ideas, and so on. Those things are stripped away. It's the energy flow, the state of consciousness that you have developed, that you've acquired by acting as you've acted, that you will carry with you. The fact that he did everything that he had to do with a very clear mind made his mind even clearer when he died. And I could feel it very strongly as it was when he was a young man, when I was just a child, a little toddler. But it was more than that. It was more vigorous, more fresh, as if he had gained in this lifetime in that direction. But that's who you are. That's what you'll take with you when you go. And this personality will be really just a memory. Your personality is the superficial you. Underneath that, there are these basic attributes of courage and dynamism or weakness, and the opposite, depending on how you act. When you face a test, do you meet it and try to overcome it, or do you think, oh, well, gee, it's too much trouble? These things determine the quality of your energy, the strength of your energy. All of that is what you really are. So that is you, which is somewhat behind the scenes and directs what's happening on stage. But the real you is that which is behind the scenes and watches all this play. And again, you really are out of time. It's a fascinating subject. How long does it take for us to achieve this knowledge of what we really are?